Zerg Death Knight is a new archetype from the mini set of the Starcraft. The idea behind this deck is that you use the Infestor to buff up your Zergs in addition to all of the extra death rattle effects that Death Knight has. Something that you can use in this deck is that really empowers the deck is the Worm card. Being able to draw two cards and then reduce down those cards by one each is very powerful, especially when they already cost such a low amount. In addition to that, it also increases the consistency of the deck being able to draw through those cards. The mulligan that you want to go for is Nydus Worm, Spawning Pool, Buccanier, Infestor, sometimes the Handler, and also sometimes the Chillfallen Baron. The idea behind some of the choices in the deck is with the Baneling, you can use it to take out your opponent with its AoE, and if you put the 1-drop spell onto it, that it will give it Taunt and Lifesteal, so that all that damage that goes to the board ends up being lifesteal damage, so you can actually have some defense against more aggressive archetypes. It also means that you can take back the board as well, since you do the AoE to the whole board. Going into the gameplay footage, it's currently turn 4. I'm sitting in a relatively decent position. The only thing that I'm missing at the moment is my Infestor. I do have the board at the moment against this Zerg Hunter opponent. They are an aggressive archetype as well, but their minions can't get as big as mine in terms of their stats. So something that I need to be making sure that I'm thinking about and playing around is them getting to 3-2. So I'm hoping to be able to get a buff relatively soon so I can get my Banelings a little bit bigger. The Handlers are also quite useful in this matchup too. And you'll notice that I'm not attacking the opponent as well, because since I had the 3/1/1s on the board and they chose the spell relatively quickly, I just instantly assumed that it was going to be Explosive Trap. So I don't want to lose this board position that I have. And since they didn't have a board at that current point in time, I also do have a pretty decent assumption that they don't have any of the things like Freezing Trap or Bait and Switch. So it means that me just having a board like this, although it will get cleared by Explosive Trap, I'm able to just play around with whatever they're doing, because I highly doubt that they've got Bait and Switch to buff up their minions. So they end up playing down their Zerglings, which are the 3/2s at the moment. I do have at the moment, my AoE was only going to deal 1 damage spread to the board, so it's a little bit weak at the moment. I did just get the Infestor, which is really powerful for me to have, so I'm just deciding what the best way to go about it is to play it. I trade the 1/1 into the 3/2 just to get it down onto the field, and I play down my Buccaneer here and then my Infestor. So with that, it ends up getting the Reborn onto it, and then I do some trading with my minions as well, and then I end up going face with the 1/1, I believe. Oh no, I end up just holding it, which is fine, because once again, I am just trying to take control of the board. And the 3/2 is able to apply pressure as well, so I can get the extra value from the 1/1 Zergling. They end up using their Parrot Sanctuary to be able to get extra ones of their Zerglings out, which is fine. I do have the hero card, so it means that I'll be able to do an AoE to the board, and I'll be able to take advantage of them in their certain position that they are in. They do have the Hydralisk, but since I do have a wide board, it doesn't really deal too much damage to any of my minions, any of my face, which is probably what their attempt is trying to do. They end up playing that down, and since they've gone so wide, they are in a position that really gets countered very hard by... It can get countered hard by the Baneling with Infestor there, but they are getting countered really hard just by the hero card, which I end up playing, and obviously it just puts me in a very resounding position here. So I use the hero card, it AoEs and clears the entire board while getting myself some 4/7s onto the board. Their secret does end up proccing, which is Hidden Meaning, which is another card that I was playing around too, so they wouldn't get the advantage from it. And with the hand that I've got, it's relatively decent going into the next turn as well, because I currently have a 3/3 Baneling, so if I need to use the Orbital Moon on it, it means that I'll be able to get Lifesteal as well, and it will be able to get me essentially back up to full health, so I don't need to worry too much about them dealing with me, dealing lethal damage. They end up playing down their Zerglings here, so they got some more 3/2s, and since they just used the spawning pool, they're able to use the rush and clear my board, which is a little bit scary. but I do still have the Ravage, which is able to obviously clear. But the Lavas in my hand potentially could get a Viper. I don't end up getting a Viper, unfortunately, which is fine, but I play the Buccanier and the Infestor, just so I can establish more with the board. I also play down the Baneling as well, I believe. No. I played on the Houndmaster and the Baneling, just so I can get the establish the board onto them, and then it allows me to trade into their Lava Worms. I do also still have 18 health, so I'm in a relatively safe position in terms of being them having lethal. And with all the reborn minions on my field, it is going to be quite hard for them to get through, even with the AoE that's going to occur. They play down the Zergling with one of their Lavas and then another one. So they've got a decent sized board now. But since my minions are quite weak in my hand, even if they use Viper or whatever, it isn't going to really apply too much pressure. They do use Hydralisk, so it does clear the majority of my reborn minions. And it also clears my Buccanier. So they end up just hitting face with the that minion, the 2/5, and then they just use their hero power. Right here, I do still have Orbital Moon, so I could use that if I want to. But first of all, I can. I'm just deciding whether to use the Loki here because Orbital Breach obviously is a bit safer. It allows me to get my mana up, and since I'm in a position right now that I do have the significant advantage, it is obviously important for me to be considering my choices. I trade into the 2/1 first, so I don't waste any of the damage from my Ravage, and then I end up just passing the turn. I could have used the Orbital Moon there to be able to put it onto my Baneling, but I did just want to hold it just in case something else, or they end up getting a wider board so I can use it in a future turn. And it also allows me to put it on the Infestor if I really want to as well. So going into this turn, I do end up drawing into the Viper. So the Viper gives Reborn to your minion, so it's really powerful in terms of putting into the Zergs. It ends up hitting into their Niall, and then I can AoE their board using the Baneling, so it deals quite a lot of damage to them. I then put down my spawning pool and I get it active, just because with the spawning pool, it's the rush turn that you end up getting from it is really, really quite strong. I end up trading first with my 1/1 and then I use the hero power, just because I do want to try and get rid of the Titan and try and get rid of the minions without losing too much of my damage. And with this board that I have here, I am in quite a solid position to be able to get lethal next turn, because and while I'm also saying this, please subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I really would appreciate it. So the bird watching that they have is not too much of a concern for me, because once they do a Ravage, it ends up being obviously not very effective into my wide board and my 22 health. And with the board that I have, it is pretty much an insurmountable lead against them. Going into the Shaman matchup, my Mulligan is looking for the Infestor, looking for the Nydus Worm, looking for Buccanier. Those are pretty much the solid sort of cards to be going for. Baron sometimes is a choice, but I end up just getting rid of it because I am looking once again for those other lower cost minions. I do get a Mosh Pit and a Brood Queen from my Mulligan. So Mosh Pit's useful in terms of putting it onto the Infestor or onto your Baneling if you need to be able to use it to get extra AoE. My opponent's playing Shaman, and it's generally going to be either the Turbolus Shaman or the Starship Shaman. I end up getting into my barrage here and I just pass, because then I could have used hero power in that situation to be able to go into them, but it didn't really. It felt a lot better just being able to get down my 2-cost card for future turns. I end up drawing into my Infestor here, which is quite powerful to be having. And then I end up drawing into an Infestor and Zergling. So if I draw into Death Growl, I'll be able to get that spread very easily onto those minions. I have Brood Queen as well for next turn, so they are taking the board at the moment, and they can more than likely get their backstage bouncer, which they do end up doing. Obviously, this is quite a threatening board, so in this matchup, I am looking now also for Orbital Halo. I end up just deciding what my best play is, and putting down the Infestor is relatively decent. I also use the one with 3 mana rather than 2, because the 3 mana one's a lot easier to be able to combo out. And I didn't really have another 2-mana minion that I really wanted to play on the board. I could have used hero power there, but I didn't feel as powerful in terms of my choices. And with the minions that I have on here, if they do trade into the Infestor, it means that the Zerglings will get buffed and it'll be more difficult for them to deal with. That's the reason why they end up doing a relatively awkward trade into my minions. Because if the Zerglings do get the buff, obviously it's a little bit scarier for them to be able to deal with into them. And with also the important thing as well that I wanted to do was make sure that I played down the 3 minions, because I'll be able to get the reborn effect onto my Infestor using the mosh pit. They end up just trading into my cards. They used one of their backstage bounces, which obviously saved me having an extra 4 damage going into me. They end up board locking themselves as well with the frog. I don't particularly have a great play at this turn, so I end up just using the draw card, the Chillforge Baron, to make sure that I end up trying to establish for next turn. I know that I do need to get Orbital Halo as well at this point in time, because with the wide board they have, I do need to try and take back control of what they're doing. And obviously getting an extra 2 draws is going to be able to get me closer to that, because unless they use the Gift of Thrall onto it to make it into a frog, it does make it extremely powerful for them. They end up using Trusty Companion and just trading, so they are a little bit off lethal, but obviously is getting quite close with the 8 health that I do have. They end up getting an SCV down onto their board to reduce their battle cruiser. So my next turn is always going to be playing down the Baneling just to try and deal with the board that's being threatened here. And with Buccanier, it also allows that minion to be able to get reborn. So I end up drawing into a Zergling, so it's always going to be trade the Infestor. I trade into the 6/7 because my Baneling is going to be a 3/3 once that trade does occur. I play down the Zergling and the Baneling. With the Buccanier, just so that obviously I get the extra Death Rattle effect, but it didn't particularly matter in that situation because it was already going to apply it with Orbital Halo, because I'd already used the Zergling that was on the far right of my hand. So they end up using the the lock-on. It reduces their starport, but I think they forgot that since I do have the buff, it doesn't apply for it. So they hit with their frog, and then they end up obviously getting me a little bit of extra lifesteal doing that as well. So they end up having to trade their SCV into the 3/1. And that obviously isn't a great trade for them, since I then get to deal a lot of damage to their board, which leaves them just with a single frog, and I end up getting most of my health back due to the Orbital Halo being on the 3/1. The Baneling, obviously, as you can see, that ended up saving me considerably by getting me back a lot of the extra health that I had lost there. They end up playing another backstage bouncer, which I'm not too scared about, especially since I do have another mosh pit. I end up putting down the Death Rattle onto the Yodeler, and then I just trade into the backstage bouncers, and I just go face, and that's obviously the game there. So, like, once you do get the board back, especially against a Shaman, you are in a situation, especially if you have Infestors, you are in a great position. Going against a Warrior, it's once again a very similar sort of style. You want to make sure that you're looking for your Worm and your Infestor. Those are the main sorts of cards that you are looking for with this. The Dread Handle is also something that can be decent. I don't usually like keeping the Zergling, just because, like, it is decent, but when you get it on the Worm, obviously it ends up becoming a 0 cost when you do that. I end up getting 2 Chillforge Baron, which is relatively decent in this matchup to be able to draw cards, and I also do have the Worm. So my turn 1 plays nothing because I don't have a Miracle Salesman or anything like that. I could have put the Zergling down, which maybe was an idea, but I did once again really want to get the Infestor, because Infestor is so vital for the deck. I end up drawing my Death Growl, and I use my coin here, and then I use the Worm. The Worm ended up hitting the Infestor, and it also hits a Zergling, which is essentially 100% the best way that this could have occurred for me, because next turn I can play down the Zerglings. I can then put the Infestor in the middle, and then I can use the spreading, the Death Growl, which will obviously create all of those having the buff. And drawing into the Yodeler as well means that even if they clear 2, they more than likely will only be able to clear 2 of these, that I can use the Yodeler then on the last minion to be able to get the extra buff going onto it. Extra buff going into the other Zergs that I have. So they end up drawing a card. They're currently sitting turn 4, so it's not too much of a threatening position for them to be in for me. They trade into my 1/1. It obviously gets my guy buffed into a 2/2, and then I end up having a 5/4 with Infestor. I play down my Yodeler because obviously getting the extreme buff on the minions is very powerful in any matchups, but this matchup in particular. And I'm sitting on quite a decent board. The next turn's obviously going to be putting down the spawning pool because it means that I'll be able to establish more of a threatening board towards them. I also get the handler here as well, so I just use the spawning pool to be able to get my Zergling. I'm going to trade the handler and the Yodeler into the 3/5 so my Infestor can deal damage to their face. And then I just play down the Zergling just so I can have a decent sized board against them. The idea for next turn, like, they could potentially have an AoE or a Ziliax or something, but this board is starting to get too big for them to be able to deal with. I do draw into the Viper and I end up using it straight away because it gives reborn to my Infestor and things like that. It does hit their hand, which is okay. Like, it's not great, but it's not terrible. And then I end up just trading into the Crystal and I just go face with the extra damage that's here. And I use my hero power just to push a little bit more damage and obviously get another corpse into the pool. Next turn with the spawning pool, it does mean that I can do a lot of clearing because I will have 6... the Zerglings are 6 damage now. And with them having rush, it means that I can deal a lot of damage going into the following turn against them. I can also use the Orbital Halo as well if I want to on something to be able to give it reborn and do extra trading. I end up drawing into another Infestor here. I don't particularly need to use it, and I'm just right now checking to see if I have lethal by doing this particular play. I think I'm just a little bit off, but pushing this sort of damage is too threatening for them to be able to really concern me. Like, they could do a Bob the Bartender, but it's not really too much of a concern. I do have the reborn minions as well, so it means that even if they did clear this board that's here, that they'll end up losing the following turn anyway. They use Sleep Under the Stars, so this does show to me they don't have the Ziliax. Even with Ziliax, this board would be too strong for it. Like, I'd still be able to get the 30 damage down onto them. So they end up drawing some more cards. They use their refreshing... they end up refreshing their mana crystals as well. And with only 4 mana left, they're not going to be able to clear this board that's here, especially since I have the 1/1, because they can't just use Bladestorm onto it, and then they end up just conceding. Like, Bladestorm wouldn't obviously win them that situation anyway, but yeah. Okay, so going into Warlock, so the Warlocks now are playing Location Warlock, or they're playing the Jailer Warlock, which allows you to be able to get at the big buff dude. So the important thing, once again, for this matchup is I'm making sure that I am getting my Worm and my Infestor out. Those are obviously the most important cards to be using in this particular matchup against them. I end up just full mulliganing my hand because I am looking for, once again, the Infestor and the Worm, because those are the highest win rate cards. The Spawning Pool obviously is a card that you want to be keeping too. I end up drawing essentially the ideal hand for this matchup because, well, pretty much for any matchup, because I get the Spawning Pool active and I also do have my Worm that's here. The Spawning Pool is especially important because it allows you to get your Infestor play online a lot earlier. I do draw into the second Infestor, so it means that I've got quite a threatening hand going into the next turn. And the Worm is probably going to be the next turn played against them, just so I can get some more cards onto the field. I do have I could have potentially just used the Infestor on that turn, but I ended up just opting to just hold it because I can use it for rushing in a future turn. I didn't want them to be able to do some sort of trick against me to be able to take it. And with the 1/6 that's on the board, it means that I can also apply some pressure if they end up putting down a location against it. I end up just deciding to play down one of my Infestors, so it possibly was better just having it for the next turn, but I just put the Reborn onto it and just end up using my barrage so I can get those minions into my hand, the 2 extra AoE minions. And I put the orbital halo onto it just so it has the reborn effect to play against them. They end up using a health drink, which obviously then gets the buff onto my other dudes. And since it allows to respawn again, like I think they were thinking that it would end up with just 1 health because of the reborn, but once you put the buff on it, it just applies automatically. I play down the Yodeler here to get the extra buff onto my minions, and I'm not really in a position that I really need to worry about them taking me out with their cards, so I just play down a Zergling, the 1 mana Zergling, just so I make sure I don't float any mana, and just pass over to them, because I know that this deck does run a lot of AoE, and if they do use an AoE, they would be able to clear this board relatively easily. So they end up using Symphony of Sins. I think they were planning on getting the one that deals 6 damage to all characters. They end up getting the one that is just to the draw minions. So they end, so it is a little bit threatening, but it's potential that they also don't get that sort of greater card. I do use the Yodeler here because it obviously establishes my buff some more onto my other minions. And then I end up just counting just to see if I do have lethal, but I'm a little bit off at the moment. I'm currently dealing 23. So I just use the hero power and then just pressure face onto them. So it still puts them in a position that they're not sitting very well. And I don't use my spawning pool as well because I do want to make sure that those minions are getting the extra value they need to. They end up playing their Titan down, which is a little bit concerning because obviously it does clear my board and it makes them all their minions them summon 3/2s now. So I do need to make sure that I'm thinking about this Titan. I don't really want them to be getting taunt because if they do get taunt, it is a little bit of a concern for me. I do get Kerrigan, but this turn, I'm also at the moment counting to see how many of the buffs that I do have, so I can trade into the Titan with my Brood Queens, and obviously my Zerglings that I have. I play down the Zerglings here, and I end up trading the Zerglings, I think, into it. Yeah, I trade the Zerglings into it just because the Brood Queens obviously are providing a lot more value, and they are a lot more threatening to the opponent than the Zerglings are. Like, it does mean that I don't have those minions, but they also will trade a lot better if they do end up obviously having this sort of play where they're getting the 8 damage rush down onto the board. So they end up just clearing most of my board, which ends up obviously applying a little bit of a threat towards me. But I just play down the Chillforge Baron because I want to see what card I end up getting. It is not a great sort of position to be in since they do have quite a wide board, but I need to make sure that I'm dealing with all the stuff that's there. So I play down my Zergling and my other dudes. I use the Ravage just because I do currently have the extra damage, and I clear off the 1/6/2, so it's more likely to hit the minions that I want. And then I play down the Orbital Moon onto my Baneling, just so it means that the minions that I do come up against, they have to trade into it, and it just gets me that little bit of extra life, even though it's only 1 life at the moment. It forces them into having trades that they don't really want to have as well. And with the current hand that I have, I am sitting in a relatively decent position for what they're going to do. So they trade into my Baneling here, and if they use an AoE, that will obviously clear the Baneling, but they end up just conceding because that would also kill their Brood Queens. I'm assuming that they were going to play down with the Kerrigan, and they end up just obviously conceding. So going into Demon Hunter obviously is usually an aggressive style archetype. I do want to make sure that my Mulligan is considering that, so I do keep one of the Miracle Salesmen's, and then I just chuck away the other cards because I'm looking for the Infestor. Orbital Moon also is great, and also the Baneling here too is quite useful because with the Baneling, once again I can use that AoE to be able to heal up, or I can put it onto one of my minions to be able to get that little bit of extra time in a turn. I do play down my Miracle Salesman here and pass. Obviously it's quite useful going into a Demon Hunter because they won't be able to trade very well into the Miracle Salesman, or if they leave it on the board, it means that I'll be able to force some damage against them. So that they end up playing down the Battle Fiend, and then they use coin and they get another spawning pool down at the board. They obviously use the spawning pool to get it active. This allows me to be able to trade into the Battle Fiend if I want to. I play down my own spawning pool though, and then I just get the get the spawning pool active, and I play to my Zerglings. This means that I can apply some more pressure towards that Battle Fiend, even if they do trade into my Miracle Salesman. Because with the 1/1s on the board, they don't usually run an AoE that would be able to deal this with this board just this turn. It'd have to be the next turn since they already used the coin for the hot coals, if they were trying to use hot coals on me. I do obviously have my 1/1s here, but I do trade away my snake oil to just draw an extra card because I am looking for the worm or the infestor to be able to deal with the minions that potentially could be coming up. And having the Buccanier on here, it's essentially a pseudo taunt because they don't want to be having that sitting on the board against them. They end up playing down the Zerglings and they deal 3 to my Buccanier. And then they use the rush part of it too. So they end up losing a lot of their advantage by using the rush here because although it does mean that they have a minion that's established on board, they don't have the rush that's there anymore. I played on my Buccanier, and then I also get the Banelings out of that, out of the spell. And the lava obviously is going to apply some pressure towards them as well if they do end up drawing, if I end up getting the Viper or things like that. They use Paraglide, which does demonstrate to me that they're pretty much going to be chilling this turn. There isn't too much of a threat that they have on the board to be able to deal with my things. So I can obviously clear what they have if I want to using the spawning pool. With the Zergling coming out as the minion, it's not really an ideal sort of one that you want to be having. So I end up just using the hero power and playing down the Miracle Salesman. I did make a little bit of a mistake here because obviously the ideal play would have been possibly playing down the Buccanier and get the reborn into those minions. But if they do clear that Buccanier, it is a little bit concerning since I wouldn't be able to then get the extra buff onto the Infestor when I eventually get it. Having the lavas go into my hand as well is especially important because it's allowing me to get a higher chance of getting the Buccanier. They do have the Ariana here, which is going to be able to trade into my Brood Queen. So I do need to make sure that I am going to taking out that Ariana because it's able to do a lot of damage once you do have the abilities put onto it. I end up getting my Infestor with the lava, so I play down the Buccanier and play down the Infestor to be able to get the buff onto it. I use my spawning pool here because it will allow me to trade the Infestor and get the buffs onto all my guys. I also play down the Orbital Moon because since I had the Buccanier on that side, I can use the ability to get it to have have reborn again. And then I go face with the 3/3 because the Orbital Halo does allow once again to have rush for that minion and then go face. So now that I've got a decent sized board here and I've got the Yodeler in hand, they do need to clear my Infestor, otherwise that they will end up losing because the Yodeler will become too big, will make my board too big for them. They do end up sending 4 damaged face, but since I'm on 24 with a board like this, and I'm just about to play down the Yodeler, it should force a concede from them because they're not sitting in a very decent position. I play down the Zerglings as well just to apply extra pressure, and then they end up just conceding. Because since the deck isn't running Oracle anymore, it means that they can't clear minions like 5/5s without obviously using the hot coal strategy. Going into this game, I'm playing against a Death Knight. It will pretty much certainly be a Zerg Death Knight, so I need to make sure that I'm mulliganing for the cards that I need. I do end up putting away the Buccanier this game, which is possibly a mistake. Like, it's usually good to keep the Buccanier, but I was also thinking about the importance of getting Infestor first in this matchup to be able to get the extra tempo and the extra board that you need to be able to. Because once you lose the board in this matchup, especially if the Infestors make the other Zergs too big, it does make it too difficult to be able to clear. By playing down the Zerglings on this turn, it also means that I'm able to take out the Buccanier with the Dread Handler, because they were more than likely going to be playing down their own Infestor next turn. And it then sets me up for future turns to not have to worry about them having the Buccanier to get the buff. They end up just opting then to use the worm to make sure that they can obviously get more established. And they do get it down to Brood Queen. So at the moment I'm at a significant disadvantage with them having the extra draws and such. I do get my own, I end up playing my own Brood Queen down and go face. I didn't play the Infestor because I am looking to get a little bit more buff from it. And with if I can find a Buccanier or something, it will be a lot better for me. They end up getting that other one, which does obviously make this game significantly harder because they've now got an extra 5-card advantage over me, plus those cards have had reduced in their mana. They end up just sending their Brood Queen face, which does allow me to be able to trade into their Brood Queen next turn if I want to. I get the Orbital Moon, which at the moment isn't able to cause any effect. I'm just thinking at the moment if I am going to play the Infestor or not. Because if I could play down the Infestor with the Orbital Halo to be able to get the proc on it, but I opt just to play down the Chillforge Baron, which draws me the Baneling Barrage. This allows me to, it allows me to set up for future turns in terms of getting my AoE down onto them to be able to get back the board possibly. A problem that does come from that with only just playing the one card in my hand is that with the lava coming in, it does mean that I'm going to overdraw. It's not too much of an issue considering that I do have the hero in my hand. They also play down their Infestor this turn, which is which I can trade into, and it's definitely important in this situation to trade into it, because if they did have a buff for it, the Yodeler, it would be terrible in this situation to occur to me. I end up just putting down my Mosh Pit and trading into their Infestor. The Brood Queen obviously does get extra value for them by having it out onto the field, but it's not really worthwhile me trading into that rather than the Infestor. Going into next turn, unless they use their spawning pool, which once again that is quite an advantage they do have that with that sitting on the board, they won't be able to clear my Infestor and I can use the Yodeler going onto it. They do currently have the 2/2 Zerglings as well, so they end up using their spawning pool to give rush to all their Zerglings, and it's definitely very powerful in terms of being able to take control of the board. And with my location being the Mosh Pit rather than the spawning pool, I do need to think about my Orbital Halo turn to try and get back the board against the opponent. Because with Orbital Halo or with the Yodeler and the AoE, it does mean that you can generally clear this sort of board. And also the other thing I can think about going into the next turn is I could just use my hero to clear the board with the 3 damage procs. And that ends up being the decision that ultimately will end up being best, because at the moment they don't have a board that has any minions that are over 3 health. And with that being the case, it means that it is at its best value at the moment to play it down and take re-control of the board, with while also applying that extra pressure towards them. So I end up just looking at my cards that I drew that turn, which isn't really too useful for me, and I just play down the Kerrigan. This clears their board, and it means that I'm in a position that they will need to apply some sort of pressure towards me, otherwise it will get a bit too overwhelming for them. With the Mosh Pit as well established on the board, it means that with these lavas that I have in my hand, I can get more Infestors with the buff on them to be able to deal some be threatening towards their board. They end up playing down a Zergling here, which isn't too much of a concern for me. They did use their second spawning pool, which means that they won't be able to have rush anymore in this game. They do get the Rustakar down, and then it does take control of my Brood Queen. But with them playing that down, it's not too much of a concern for me. I do also get a Viper here as well, with one of my lavas. And right now I'm just deciding what the best way to play my hand down is. I do end up just playing the 2 Banelings plus the Viper down, because if I need to, I can use Orbital Halo to be able to clear the board as well. And I just end up putting a reborn onto one of the Banelings, just so if I need it in a future turn, I'll be able to use it with once again with the Orbital Halo. They end up playing down their Infestor, and since it is relatively weak at the moment, I'm not in too much of a position that is very concerning for me. With them playing down their Viper, it obviously does get reborn, but it took out my Tentacle, so they only are able to get they're able to get all of the value coming from it. But since I do have the AoE, it means I can clear this board and still establish some more pressure towards them. I just play down my Chillforge Baron here just to make sure that I'm getting more cards, because at the moment my hand isn't very strong, and the lavas that I have in my hand at the moment aren't very useful either. I also do trade the Baneling first before using the Ravage, because otherwise the Ravage could potentially hit their minions and waste some of the damage that's there. They end up getting down to 4 health, which is, obviously quite threatening towards them. And with the Chillforge Baron, it is in a relatively decent position to be able to deal with their minions that they have. They play down their Baneling, which with 4 health is able to clear my board if they end up having the availability to. But there was only 1 card in that hand that they could have hit then to clear with the Baneling, and then they end up having to use their own Corpsicle to take it out, and then which then obviously does clear most of my minions that are here, because my Baneling clears, then their Baneling clears, and so on. They end up just playing down a Zergling to apply some pressure, so they've got 2 4/4s down on the board. I do get a Viper and a Zergling in this hand as well, which is relatively decent for me, and they are sitting just on 4 health. So right now I'm just thinking of what my best play is. I end up just playing down the Infestor to be able to establish some more pressure towards them, and I'm going to be playing down the Viper very shortly. I'm going to be playing down the Viper very shortly. Oh no, I give the buff actually, just to apply more pressure. No, I feel like I played on the Viper. Yeah, I play down the Yodeler here. It gets more my minions to increase their buff. And then I just play down the Zerglings potentially to apply more pressure. No, I just use the Ravage to be able to potentially hit their face, because the more damage I get onto their face, the better. I do still have the Orbital Halo if I need to be able to deal with potential threats that they could be having. And I've got the Dreadhound Handler to be able to deal with them too. They end up just putting down a Corpsicle and they clear. They get their Lava and their Zergling, and so they are going to be able to re-establish a decent-sized board. Their Viper does hit my Miracle Salesman, which allows me to cycle through another card using the Snake Oil. They put down another Viper, which does clear the Houndmaster, but then I'm able to apply a little bit more pressure onto them by having just the one damage minion that's on there. I don't really have any sort of big play that I want to do this turn, so I just cycle 1 card which does reveal the Buccanier. This turn I could play down the Hydralisk, but it's a bit too risky. I can just use Ravage for this turn to be able to establish some more pressure towards them. And, the Hydralisk could hit something, but it would only do 1 proc, and it would only give 1 extra Ravage proc. So I end up just floating 1 mana and passing over to them. If I'm really desperate, I do have the Baneling plus the Orbital Halo turn to be able to clear their board and also get back my pressure. They end up just playing down their Buccaneer and their Baneling, which isn't too much of a threat towards me. It does have reborn, but since my minions are at 6/6, they'll proc their reborn, and then I'll proc my reborn, and then it will mean that I still do get the I do still establish back the board. They play down their second one, and then they end up just using a Corpsicle onto my 1/1, and they trade into my 1/1. So at the moment, they're not really establishing anything, and I do have the ability now to be able to make it so I can clear this board with just the hand that I'm currently sitting on. I get a Death Growl as well, which is decent, and I just play down the Roach as well, just because it means that... I think I play down the Roach. It means that my Ravage gets a little bit stronger, but I also get more Banelings into... out with it. I played on my Buccaneer here. I played on the extra Baneling. I did make a misplay with that, but I ended up just putting the Reborn onto this other 6/6. It would obviously be preferred going onto the having the Reborn already, but it didn't cost me anything because I was always going to be doing that Orbital Halo turn anyway. So going into this turn here, when they do trade into my 6/6, it will clear their board. Then their minions will clear my 6/6, and then I'll clear them. So I should end up still having, like, they won't have a way to clear this board before, like, they'll need to use extra stuff to be able to clear this board. They do get a mosh pit, and they put it onto their Viper, so it doesn't really mean anything here, because once it clears here, my minions go into theirs, their minions then go into mine, and with the reborn that's on my 6/2 that's on here, it then goes into their minions, and then my minion reborns, and then they end up taking out the minion that I have. And with only one card left in their hand, they don't really have any sort of way to be able to take me out. Thank you for watching the content if you've gotten this far, and please like and subscribe for more. Bye for now.